Hi, my name is Dr. Ola Brown, and this presentation I prepared because you won't believe the number of people that come up to me asking, how do they invest in a venture capital fund? What is a venture capital fund? How can they get venture capital exposure? So I just decided to make this video to help people understand the asset class and why anybody would invest in a venture capital fund. So I'll start by talking a bit about myself, and then I'll define what a venture capital fund is, the trends in venture capital funding, the overall deal activity that we're seeing around the globe, and the advantages of investing in a venture capital fund. And then I'll end with talking about, the steps that any investor should take in terms of research and due diligence if they are considering investing in a venture fund. So my name is Ola Brown. I started life as a doctor, working for the NHS in the UK. I then went on to go and start my own company, and it was in emergency services and emergency supplies across Africa. I then became an LP in a fund. So I invested in a fund myself for reasons that we'll discuss later on in this presentation, before running my own venture fund. I've invested in 30 companies right now, early stage companies in Africa, both as an angel and through my main VC fund. Those companies have gone on to grow, delivering returns to investors. So I've delivered a DPI of 5x, which is an investment return of 5 times what my investors invested in me back to investors. And that worked out to a 25% IRR. I've been doing venture capital investing since 2015-16, so about for a decade now in Africa. I've written various reports on venture capital, including the HealthCare Unicorns report. I've taught venture capital at some of the largest universities in the world, and I also hold a master's degree in finance and economic policy, and I'm currently doing my doctorate in finance, looking at fintech and monetary policy. So that's a bit about me, enough about me, and I'll go on to speak about what a venture fund is. So a venture fund is a kind of investment vehicle that pools funds from different investors called limited partners and invests it in promising early stage companies called portfolio companies. And we do that in exchange for an ownership stake in those portfolio companies. So I will just define sort of the terms that you'll be hearing when you're thinking about investing in venture capital. Limited partners. A limited partner is an investor who provides capital into a venture fund, but does not participate in the daily management of the venture capital fund. That doesn't mean that they might not be part of an advisory board usually called an LPAC, that looks at governance issues with the fund and meets regularly to discuss the fund. They might also be part of the investment committee, the IC, that is part of the committee that votes on particular deals or votes on particular investments. The LPs might be part of an advisory board that isn't an LPAC. So if you have an LP that is a strategic investor with particular expertise, they might be part of an advisory board. Some funds even have a board of directors, for instance, but the LPs aren't day to day, every single day managing the fund. But they might participate in the fund in various ways. And obviously, they attend the AGMs regularly and they get reports regularly about the investment. An early stage company is a company that is in the initial stages of its development, developing their products or services or businesses. And these are the type of companies that an early stage focused venture capital fund would invest in. Equity is a way of investing in firms, which means that you buy shares in that firm, which is very different from giving the company debt and lending money to them. You actually become a co-owner of that company. So that's equity, when you co-own a company. And an exit is when you have liquidity from those shares and you exit ownership in that company, either partially or wholly. And that usually happens either when another bigger investor comes in and buys all the shares that the earlier investor bought, when the company lists on the public stock exchange and members of the public, households and institutions in the public then buy the shares from that person, or in an acquisition. And I think you can remember, like, the most famous acquisition that's happened recently is Elon Musk buying the whole of Twitter, which meant that was an exit for the existing investors because he decided to buy 100% of the shares in Twitter and take it for himself. And that was an exit for all the existing investors in Twitter. So these are the terms I'll be using, and I wanted to define them in the beginning so that when I use the term LP or equity or exit, you immediately know what I'm talking about. So trends in venture capital funding. I will start with sort of talking about venture capital as an asset class and some of the things that we've achieved. So startups rate 77% of investors active in Africa's venture landscape in 2022 were international investors, while 23% were African investors. 26% of funding recipients were startups with a female founder or startups with gender diverse funding teams. And 448 unique companies were backed last year by a fund manager. And when you look at the number of deals around the world, you see that North America, for instance, has did 13,251 deals. So they do a huge number of venture capital deals, and they put $225 billion into venture capital. So that's half of Nigeria's GDP in North America went into venture capital deals. When you look at Europe, they did about half of that. So they put about they did about 89.5 billion, and they put that into 7,000 deals. The venture capital market in Africa is much smaller, and I think that speaks to the opportunity. Venture capital, $5.2 billion of venture capital went into just 786 deals in Africa, which shows that there's a lot of opportunity in Africa to invest in technology companies on the continent. So what are the advantages of investing in a venture capital fund? First of all, diversification. A limited partner or an investor in a venture capital fund can benefit from diversification because they're usually investing across asset classes. So they'll put some of their money in real estate, some of their money in public stocks, some of their money in bonds, and venture capital is just another sort of pocket or asset class where they can put money to make sure that they're diversified. So at any point in the economy, they're making money from one of their investments. Network. A limited partner or an investor in a VC can also benefit from network. So you're part of an LPAC, like I mentioned, usually an advisory board, attending VC events, can all provide access to network. Knowledge. A lot of people invest in VC funds because they want to learn about the future. They say software is eating the world, and software companies and technology companies have an oversized influence in the economy. If you think about companies like Google and Airbnb and Microsoft, they have a huge influence on the world today and will have an even bigger influence in the future. So learning about technology, learning about the way technology companies scale is another reason that people invest in venture funds. Returns. Let's not forget the main reason why anybody invests, because venture capital has the ability to give above benchmark returns. So a study by Cambridge Associates shows that venture capital funds have outperformed the public markets by 4.8 percentage points annually over the past 25 years. So people invest in venture capital because of the superior returns. It's a high-risk asset class, but it's also a high-return asset class. And people invest in it because they want to achieve alpha. They want to achieve higher than benchmark returns. Impact. According to the African Venture Capital Association report in 2023, the number of jobs created by VC-backed African startups saw an increase of close to 100%, employing 34,000 people on the continent. Africa has the highest number of poor people in the world, so the highest rates of poverty. And the reason why it has the highest rates of poverty is because people don't have jobs. And this is a massively job-creating sector. In America, venture capital is only 0.1% of US GDP, but produces 11% of jobs. So imagine the impact of putting more money into venture capital in Africa. It means it will create jobs, it means it will create innovation, it means it creates an exportable product for Africans, and leverages on this entrepreneurial spirit that you see wherever you travel in Africa. So how do you invest in a venture fund? I've told you all these great things about the benefits of returns and diversification and network and impact, but how do you actually go about investing in a venture fund, and what kind of things would you look at if you were wanting to invest in a venture fund? First of all, doing your research, doing your homework about the different types of venture funds available in the market, considering the sector focus of those funds, the stage focus, the geographical focus, the track record of the general partner, what kind of returns that they've delivered before, what is in their portfolio and how the valuations of those companies have grown. Is super important, really understanding the asset class and understanding where you want to focus from. And remembering that specialist firms generally outperform generalist firms. So firms that have a specialized focus in something that they're really good at generally tend to outperform more generalist firms that invest in everything. Contacting them. So you might start to attend venture capital conferences or GPLP conferences where you can meet potential managers and you can interview them at those conferences, or you can work through a broker who can send you venture managers or send you different sorts of portfolios of different venture managers, so you can make a choice as to the type of manager that you would want to invest in. Evaluate. Now you have your list of potential general partners, people that run the venture firms, then you can start looking at the contracts and doing due diligence, looking in their data rooms, looking at their pitch decks, and further evaluations, negotiating terms that you would want to have as an LP. Committing. At some point, you will probably select a firm or a number of firms that you would like to back as an LP. And then there's a contracting process. You'll be signing an LPA, which is a limited partner agreement, and officially joining the fund as a limited partner of that fund. So I'm going to briefly talk about HealthCap Africa, which is a fund we're raising now. It's a $20 million fund. We see 300 deals a quarter, which works out to 1,200 deals per year. We've done 25 deals already, so unlike most venture funds, we have 25 deals already warehoused and completed within the fund that you can look at and evaluate. We've had an exit from a previous funds that we did, and that returned the fund, like I said, gave five times money back to investors. We have had 10 startups that have raised over $80 million in follow-on capital. So companies that are raising follow-on capital tend to be companies that other investors see as viable and see as scalable and see as great companies. So a good measure of a fund that you would want to back is the amount of capital, follow-on capital, that these companies have raised since that GP invested. And just a bit more about the impact that HealthCap has had around Africa. Half of the people working in management in our portfolio companies are women. We've invested 50% of the founders that we've invested in are also women. Our portfolio companies are operational across 10 countries with almost 1 million customers, patients, and users. The total value of companies in our portfolio is almost $1 billion, and our portfolio has created 1,000 direct jobs and 13,000 indirect jobs. So if you are interested in investing in our fund or any other fund, then you can send us an inquiry email at investor.relations@healthcap.com. But thank you for listening, and I hope that you've learned a bit more about how to invest in a venture fund, why anybody would want to invest in a venture fund, and steps to doing it. Thank you.